Hello and thanks for joining us this full hour of The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here are the headlines. EU leaders prepare to formally accept Ukraine and Moldova as candidates to join the continent's economic bloc. Many children fear dead in the Afghan quake as rescuers struggle to reach survivors. Plus, it's been 6 years since Brexit. Has Britain really exited the European Union? Hello again, and let's kick things off at the EU meeting holding in Brussels as leaders are set to formally accept Ukraine and Moldova as candidates to join the continental bloc, a bold move triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It usually takes years for countries to become members of the European Union, but the Brussels summit decision will be a symbolic step that signals the EU's intention to reach deep into the former Soviet Union. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has already welcomed the bloc's green light, while both Ukraine and Moldova are expected to be welcomed into the EU's waiting room today. Georgia will be given a European perspective, but has been told it must fulfill conditions before winning candidate status. Behind the triumphant rhetoric, however, there is concern with the EU about the bloc, how the bloc can remain coherent and united as it continues to enlarge. In the meantime, Ukraine's ambassador to the EU, Chensov Veselov, says the prospects of EU membership motivates Ukrainian soldiers on the front line.
Situation, so it's...
Yes, I think it's also a signal to Moscow that the idea that Ukraine and also other countries of the former Soviet Union cannot belong to the Russia spheres of influence.
Ukraine, it will be a semi-colony of the EU, so they operate this kind of...
Yes, it's very important for whole Ukrainian society, for the army, and they have a clear reason to fight for. For me, it was also very surprising, and I was told by my friends and colleagues that our soldiers, they're calling home and asking from the front line what is happening with our candidate status. It's amazing how important it is for Ukrainian people. So it's a matter of dignity, it's a matter of fighting for the country which has a European future.
It's important that we are going to get this, and they need to deal with the issues.
In another development, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Sweden and Finland's application for NATO membership will be addressed during the Madrid summit next week. Finland and Sweden applied for NATO membership in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but have faced opposition from Turkey, which has been angered by what it says is Helsinki and Stockholm's support for Kurdish militants and arms embargoes on Ankara.
For Ukraine. And I welcome that President Zelensky will address leaders at our summit. We will improve burden sharing with more defense investment to do more together. And we will address Finland and Sweden's historic applications for NATO membership, ensuring that the security interests of all allies are addressed while making progress in their accession process. Turkey has legitimate security concerns, and we are working to resolve those with Finland and Sweden.
Lithuania's president says his country must raise defense spending to 3% of GDP to enable it to host a much larger number of NATO troops. President Gitanas Noseda says his country did not have the necessary infrastructure to host a brigade-sized unit. He says he could not give a precise figure of how much would be required, but estimated it would be in the hundreds of millions of euros. Lithuania has earmarked 1.5 billion euros. That's 2.52% of its gross domestic products in the nation of 2.8 million people to defense next year. NATO allies remain split over troop deployments, and extra weaponry should be based with eastern states closer to Russia, seeking greater permanent reinforcements on their soil, although they may lack the structure to accommodate them. Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas says her country was proposing additional troops to be allocated to defend the Baltic countries in case of an attack, but not permanently stationed there. The proposal is realistic considering how mobile the forces right now are, according to her.
To provide the best conditions for the training, for the living, and also we have to have in mind that if we are talking about a permanent presence of some battle groups here, we have to take care about also living and accommodation of families, because this is entirely different status.
The crisis around grain trapped in Ukraine must be resolved in the next month, so says British Foreign Minister Liz Truss, when she offered Britain's expertise to help resolve the situation while in Ankara today. Her Turkish counterpart, Mevlut Cavusoglu, says Turkey is taking seriously claims that Ukrainian grain was stolen by Russia and is investigating those allegations. He says Turkey would not allow grain stolen by Russia or any other country to be brought to Turkey. I want to bring in now the continental chairman of the Nigerians in Diaspora Organization Europe, Dr. Bashir Obashakola. He's right now in Moscow. Thank you, Dr. Obashakola, for joining me on the program today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I know it's probably, your first time speaking in public about, the war in Ukraine and how this is going. But it's gone on for a little more than 3 months. You think that, given the circumstances, we'd still be talking about the invasion until now?
Well, just like you mentioned, no one knows, that it takes this dimension and also the effect becoming a worldwide thing. For example, myself, and many of us who were in Russia during the Soviet Union, we count these people as brothers and sisters. And of course, we never expected, there would be a crisis that will lead to this, military confrontation that is going on. So we never expected it. And of course, it's still, something that we are hoping that it, go away. And of course, for that to happen, I think the international community should also try to rein in on both sides of the divide.
You're referring to it as a military confrontation, and it's been hard understanding how Russians see this war, because the government is telling them this is a special military operation. Is that still the rhetoric going on in Russia?
Yes, of course. Officially, it is a special military operation. And of course, the reason being that, of course, if it's going to be called something else, then that means that a lot of things will be used in the fighting. So, and I think it doesn't matter the name you call it, but that human beings are dying at both sides of the divide is something that I think the whole world should be looking at, rather than the terminology being used by any of the group.
Yeah, and I know that Russia and Ukraine do come from, they grow from the same soil, they have the same history and all that. It is difficult, watching what's happening on the other side of the border, seeing people being displaced, moving their things, not knowing where to go. One of those people, of course, were the Nigerian students who were in Ukraine, studying in Ukraine, and Nato was very helpful in getting them resettled across Europe. Talk to us about, how, the efforts that were made during that time and what's happening now?
Yeah, thank you very much. We, of course, in February, early February, when the issue of, this anticipation that there might be, this, situation we had now, of course, we, like Nido being the continental chairman, I had to contact all my chapters in Europe, and of course the frontline states of Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania. We need to, know what exactly we can do to help our compatriots. I was in touch with the ambassador, the Nigerian ambassador to Ukraine, Ambassador Alege, who was also, of the opinion that, of course, maybe there wouldn't be such type of, military confrontation that that have been circulated in the West, because people believe that they are our brothers, that it wouldn't lead to, even if it has to be, it will always limit itself to the eastern part of Ukraine, which has been on since 2014. Of course, probably because it is not as the scale is not as much as we have it now. So it seems it's not in the world news, but it had been there. So we were believing that, okay, probably it would be as limited to that region, but that it became, a whole, scale, fighting. We never expected that. So what we did was to, get information from the embassy. That was, an advisory, which we also circulated. So what we knew that Nigerians normally, few people register with the embassy. So the embassy too might not know whereabouts of Nigerians. So what we did, we had to use all the networks we have. And Nigerian diaspora organization, being, Europe, all the place in the countries of Europe, we had to mobilize our citizens, for assistance. And I want to also commend those people who contributed financially also for this purpose, to help us, to accommodate, to transport, to feed, a lot of these displaced people who were forced to cross the border to the frontline states of, countries of Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and Romania. And of course, that's, the way we started it. And we use all the network, the social network, thanks to the internet, to send information, direct people, navigate them towards the borders, and also to get them connected with our chairpersons of, at the chapter level, and the executives whose telephone number we had circulated. We also gave it to Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so that when they are issuing out their information, they could also include that. They also did that to, NIDCOM also did the same, where they used our officers, information to distribute, to circulate to the Nigerians who were looking for safety. And so the students were mostly affected because they are the largest number of, Nigerian citizens living in Ukraine. And we know, of course, of estimate from 6,000 to about 8,000 or 10,000 Nigerians were estimated to be living in Ukraine. But of course, like I mentioned earlier, few people register with the embassy, so we cannot ascertain the number of Nigerians. But what we knew that we need to do was to reach out to make sure that we have a network of Nigerians working. We know the embassies, even if you give them all the staff they need, they wouldn't have the capacity to do what they were expected to do in terms of getting Nigerians settled, right. Pending when Nigerian government was to, evacuate them. Of course, that's what we did, and we had to do that for that number of there. And currently, we're still doing it, doing in terms of information sharing. So most of the chapters are still giving them information. In Germany, for example, they have almost a weekly, seminar, information sharing. In Hungary, the same thing is still happening. And we need to do that because we need to know that the students are also having information so that they can move forward in their own life, and get something, get admission. Some of them are seeking for admission in Europe. Some move to Nigeria, but some are still stranded without, any particular, thing to do currently.
Yeah, it will be difficult reaching out to everyone who really needs help. So we do appreciate, the efforts that have been made. And some of them did come back to Nigeria. And I'm sure you've heard in the news already, some professional bodies rejecting the certificates of some of these graduates. How does that make you feel? And can Nato do anything about it?
Of course, we felt bad about it. I read the MDCN, Nigerian Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, issuing, that, I can say, not friendly, I can say, directive saying the Ukrainian medical students that graduated this year will not be, their certificate will not be recognized because they finished online. But they should know that we are in force majeure. The world has changed since COVID-19. You have hybrid of education now. So they should also think that way. We cannot continue to do things as we are in the past. So what we think they should do it as much as of course, we accept the fact that they need to make sure that the quality of doctors are up to date. And but what they are doing or the way they are going about it is too very hostile for students who have escaped, with their lives. And, finally, after many years of studying, not online, but actual studying in classes, attending clinical practices and all the rest. And now you are telling them that you won't recognize their certificate. That is too, I think that is too, absurd, if I have to use that word. And but with all due respect to the DG of the council, I think what they should do is to reach, they have to reach out to the students, give them alternatives of, probably compulsory, what we call, remedial classes or remedial practice that you can, because which I know, because I'm also a father of a medical doctor. I remember my son also had to do that in Nigeria, whereby they had to do remedial practice before going for the exams. I think that one was about 3 months or thereabout. But this one, given the situation they are, of course, they stopped classes from January, I think, or February thereabout. That means that they have passed through first semester. Second semester is where the problem is. So if that is the case, why don't you, arrange for something like that? Make it compulsory for students who graduated from Ukraine to say, okay, go for this remedial class, and of course with a reasonable cost for them, for them to finish up within 3 months or 4 months, and so that they will be able to sit for the exams probably by November. I know the June exam is already on now, so probably the Ukrainian graduates are not allowed to pass through that. Of course, maybe that's okay, but for November or October, they should allow them to come for these exams. But before then, the council should reach out, because we need medical doctors in Nigeria. For example, I had to convince my son to go to Nigeria for this purpose. Otherwise, of course, he would have joined the bandwagon of people who are now in Canada, in all those places, for their medical. But I want him to contribute to Nigerian development, at least for while he's still able to do that. And that is, I think, many Nigerians, wish to have Nigeria develop in all aspects of our endeavor, including medicine. So, so I think the MDCN should be able to do that for them, and reach out to them and make sure that their certificate is not being, belittled.
Yeah, we hope they do change their minds. But just very quickly, Dr. Obashakola, we know that Russia has come under very heavy sanctions from the West. There are over 1,000 of them. How is life in Russia now compared to even before the invasion of Ukraine?
Well, there is, Russians are used to, being in this type of situation. If you remember, Soviet Union was also under sanction, and even some of the sanctions are still on, even though Soviet Union is no more from America and all this rest. So Russia is used to living under stress and under this type of situation. They are coping well. The situation has not changed much, other than foreign companies leaving the country. And of course, while they are leaving, some of the local investors are happy to buy. They are already buying some of these assets. And of course, the situation is still very under control. Government is doing a lot. in this aspect. They are, dishing out a lot of incentives and a lot of, social, payments for their people to make sure that they don't feel the effect. For the inflation, at the initial stage was very high, but now it has stable. And of course, the exchange rate has also come back even stronger than it was before. The reason being that now Russian, prefer their own currency in transaction in oil and gas, and also, importation is limited. As a result, demand for dollars and other foreign currencies is lower. So that makes the ruble stronger. And I think that is the situation now. Of course, with the anticipation that, of course, this might be a little bit difficult going forward, but they believe, and we can see the sign that they are getting prepared. They are looking for alternatives. The logistics, which is the main issue, which are being disrupted, is being, they are channeling through other routes. And I think if they continue this way, and of course, their people are even more united, more than they were used to be. If you can see the rating of the leadership here is getting higher. And it is true. If you go on the street, you see that it is true. It's not made up. Because there are people who are proud and they wish to be respected by the world because they are the largest in Europe. And I think the world should know that you can't do without Russia in Europe or in the world. And I think the whole world should come together to make them come to the peace together with Ukraine.
Dr. Mashakola, thank you so much. We've learned a lot just through your eyes. And thank you again, for the work Nato has been doing across Europe.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Coming up after the break on The World Today. A look back at Britain's exit from the European Union 6 years on. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today, and now to one of the biggest stories from here in Nigeria, but happening in the UK. Former Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu, alongside his wife, have both been remanded in custody in the United Kingdom, charged with conspiracy to arrange or facilitate travel of another person with a view to exploitation, namely organ harvesting. Organ harvesting involves removing parts of the body, often for cash, and against the victim's will. According to the Metropolitan Police, an investigation was launched after detectives were alerted to potential offences under modern slavery legislation in May 2022. Our London correspondent, Juliana Olainka, has more.
Well, pretty disturbing news coming out of the UK this morning, and that is that a Nigerian man and woman have both been detained and charged by the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Unit for conspiring to arrange the travel of a child into the UK in order to harvest organs. One is a Beatrice Ekweremadu, and the second individual is Ike Ekweremadu. And I believe it's that second name, isn't it, that's causing shockwaves, I would say, not just in Nigeria, but across the international community, because if it is indeed, as some media outlets are speculating, the former Deputy Senate President, then this individual was once one of the most powerful politicians in Nigeria. Now, I believe the People's Democratic Party, with which he served under, have been approached for a comment. They have refused to comment thus far, but I do believe that this story is likely to pick up over the next couple of days. One of the reasons why is because it is a big story here in the UK at the moment. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, alongside Prime Minister Boris Johnson, are grappling with the migrant crisis. And the European Union say that one of the real issues is organ harvesting, and a lot of these human traffickers, if they're not able to get these asylum seekers to pay for their illegal travel, then they are using their bodies to harvest their organs. So it is a very serious issue. It is an ongoing criminal investigation, so the Metropolitan Police say they are not going to provide further details just yet, but as always, we are on the ground. As soon as we have any further information, we will be giving it to you. Juliana Olainka reporting for Channels TV News outside of Scotland Yard in London.
Thanks, Juliana. And neither the lawmaker nor his aides have commented on the development, but a source familiar with the issue has told Channel Television on condition of anonymity that Senator Ikekwe child has been suffering from a kidney disease and needed a transplant. The source says a donor was gotten and sent to the UK for investigation with the aim of providing a kidney. However, the investigation showed the kidney did not match that of Senator Ikekwe's child. Subsequently, the donor was scheduled to return to Nigeria. According to the source, the donor refused to return to Nigeria and instead reported to the UK police to seek asylum. In Afghanistan now, doctors believe many children have been killed in Wednesday's earthquake. More than 1,000 people died in the disaster on Wednesday. Heavy rain, threadbare resources and rugged terrain are hampering rescue workers. Unknown numbers of people were buried in the rubble of ruined, often mud-built homes by the magnitude 6.1 earthquake.
Villagers whose homes were flattened by the massive earthquake survey the damage as the death toll reaches 1,000. Akbar village in Paktika province is one of the many villages hard hit by the 6.1 magnitude earthquake that struck eastern provinces of Afghanistan the day before. With homes reduced to rubble and residents climb over the piles looking for valuables. Hospital wards are reportedly overflowing with people in need of treatment. Authorities say more than 1,500 were injured, and they are bracing for casualty figures to grow as information trickles in from remote mountain villages. The United Nations has called for more international support.
First of all, we are managing arguably one of the largest humanitarian operations in the world. So gladly enough, we do have sufficient staff and capacity on the ground to deploy immediately. The situation in the country is very difficult, and this does add to the burden. This does add a lot to a daily burden of survival in this particular setting. So I'm not optimistic today. I'm grateful. More needs to be done. Grateful to the donors who already reached out. And we are ready and responding on the ground.
The U.S. Geological Survey says Wednesday's quake was the deadliest in Afghanistan since 2002. It struck about 44 kilometers from the southeastern city of Kust, near the border with Pakistan. Mounting a rescue operation will prove a major test for the hardline Islamist Taliban authorities, who took over the country last August after 2 decades of war and have been cut off from much international assistance because of sanctions. The Taliban-led Ministry of Defense is leading rescue efforts.
The VOA's Ayaz Gal joins us now. Ayaz is in Islamabad. Ayaz, thanks for joining us on the program. It's sad hearing as so many children have died in the quake. How difficult has it been for rescue workers to get to those under the rubble?
Well, what we know as of this moment is that the rescue operation has been completed, and now it is time for the local and international organizations to bring in the much needed assistance. That's what the United Nations latest statement has said, and Taliban authorities are also appealing to the international community to send in more help, because the main challenge that they are facing is to somehow make sure that those injured and left homeless, especially children and women, can be provided immediate assistance like shelter, food and medicines, so there are no more casualties, because we already know that the death toll is quite high.
But there are still people on the rubble, right? So do they have the right tools to work with? Because we know that Afghanistan has been challenged economically even before this earthquake.
No, the whatever rescue work or bodies, whichever bodies have been retrieved so far, it's the local villagers who are using whatever tools they had to search for the bodies under the rubble and, you know, survivors. Because as of this evening, very few organizations or people with properly equipped to carry out this kind of rescue operation reached the spot, but because the scale of the damage is so extensive and so over a vast area, it has been the damage that has been caused. So it's not possible to bring in so much equipment so quickly, because the Taliban, I spoke to the Taliban today, they say they are heavily relying on helicopters, transport helicopters, to bring in assistance and rescue teams. And they don't have enough helicopters, and that's what they were in fact appealing to the neighboring countries to bring in some air support so that they can, transport injured people to better hospitals, because this is a poverty-stricken area, impoverished region of Afghanistan, a remote area where there are really barely enough facilities to take care of this kind of a disaster at this scale.
Indeed. And what has been the mood in the country today? What are you hearing?
Well, we know that people, as you know, Afghanistan has been suffering, because of this decades of war, people there. And right now, this calamity that has struck this part of Afghanistan, the southeastern and eastern part, obviously what we are hearing stories that there are families after families who have been basically buried under the rubble. And when they retrieved them, there was one incident in which 12 members of the family have been killed, but only one child, like 7-year-old, survived. And similarly, there were families like 20 members, 30 members who have died. So obviously, it's a sad situation for the country, and people are sad. That's what we have, we came to know and spoke to people there. But Afghanistan has been, as I said previously, one of the world's largest humanitarian emergencies. So we can say people are used to these kind of crises, but unfortunately, this is the last thing Afghans wanted at a time when they were trying to recover, and the war casualties have almost come to a halt after 20 years of conflict between the Taliban, who are currently ruling the country, and the US-led international forces, which withdrew last August. But now this calamity is hitting them, and we see more casualties, which was a routine until a year. Like daily, 30, 40 people were being killed because of the conflict, but that had stopped. And now we saw this earthquake striking parts of the country, and more casualties have occurred. So definitely, it's the international community is coming forward, and we saw today that Pakistan, Iran, and even Qatar, they sent in urgent supplies to these areas, and they were being transported, and more aid is being dispatched from neighboring countries. But as according to the Taliban officials, the scale of the devastation is so big that they are unable to handle on their own. And as of this moment, according to the UN estimates and local estimates, 3,000 families are in urgent need of assistance, food, medicines, only in Paktika province, which is the most affected area, according to officials on the ground, their estimates, and the UN estimates.
Really, really sad in Afghanistan. Hopefully the aid gets to them as soon as possible. Ayaz, thank you again for the update.
Thank you.
We've also been keeping our eyes on the floods in China. Record flooding brought by heavy rains triggered the evacuation of thousands across the country. On Wednesday, 113 rivers in China flooded above warning levels, with 7 above historical levels, according to state broadcaster CCTV. The pictures we're seeing now show footage of rescuers evacuating families from a flooded residential area in Yingde City in the southern Guangdong province. In Guangdong, the Provincial Emergency Management Department says heavy rainfall has impacted over 479,000 people, beg your pardon. It's also affected 27.13 hectares of crops, collapsed 1,729 houses, resulted in economic loss of 1.756 billion won. President Vladimir Putin, in a virtual summit hosted by China, says Russia is ready to further develop multilateral cooperation with Brazil, India, China, and South Africa, and promote the global role of Brics countries. He was speaking to leaders of the 4 other BRIC countries, saying the nations could promote global stability. President Putin says the current crisis in the global economy, which is due to the ill-conceived and selfish actions of some countries, he says, who use financial mechanisms to blame others the world over for their own macroeconomic policy faults, can be solved only through honest and mutually beneficial cooperation. He says important issues such as conflict resolution, the fight against terrorism and organized crime, climate change and dangerous infections can only be solved by working together. A Brics summit is taking place against the background of Russia's military invasion of Ukraine, an action Moscow calls a special military operation. Well, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will explain the obvious merits of the country's Rwanda asylum plan to the Prince of Wales when he sees if he raises the issue when they both meet. Prince Charles is reported to have called the policy appalling, but the Prime Minister has called for critics to keep an open mind. A pair are both attending the summit, that's the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda, in Kigali, the capital. Under the plan, people who arrive in the UK via small boats can be removed to the East African country. Critics of the scheme have raised Rwanda's human rights record and include refugee organizations, politicians and the Church of England.
I think that, you know, anybody who comes in, I'm delighted that all that Prince Charles and everybody is here today to see a country that is, I think, undergone a complete transformation, or a very, very substantial transformation. And
are you willing to defend the policy should he raise it?
I think that people need to keep an open mind about the policy. The critics need to keep an open mind about it. I think a lot of people can see its obvious merits. And yeah, of course, if I'm seeing the Prince tomorrow, I'm of course going to make that point.
The European Union's Foreign Affairs Chief says he's disappointed that the accession negotiations would not start today for would-be members Albania and North Macedonia. EU member Bulgaria in 2020 blocked the start of accession talks with North Macedonia over a dispute related to history and language. Albania is also being held back because the EU has linked its progress to that of North Macedonia.
Today we should be in the Western Balkans. Today we should be launching the negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia, and I cannot hide my disappointment. Certainly, my disappointment, I suppose the disappointment of many people. We should be launching this, but there is still a hope. I don't know what the Bulgarian parliament can do in the next hours, but things are not going well. We have to work more to integrate better and quicker the Western Balkan people in our work. I will do that in the Foreign Affairs Council, inviting them to come and to participate in our discussions. And in other sectoral policies, they can do the same thing. We have to continue working and keeping the flame of the European perspective lively. But today is not a good day.
We'll return to Europe in just a minute, but South Africa has confirmed its first case of monkeypox in the country. It's the second non-endemic country in Africa after Morocco to confirm a case. The Minister of Health, Joe Fowler, who made the announcement at a media briefing, confirmed that the case identified involves a 30-year-old man residing in the Gauteng province with no recent travel history.
Many of us have known that there's been a lot of spoken about monkeypox, which is spreading in various parts of the world. Late yesterday, I received a report from the National Health Laboratory Service indicating that they have confirmed through a laboratory test the first case of monkeypox in South Africa. The patient is a 30-year-old male from Johannesburg who has no travel history, meaning that it cannot be attributed to the disease having been acquired elsewhere. So it means that it is with us. So working with the relevant health authorities, a process of contact tracing started to trace the close contacts of this gentleman. Monkeypox is usually a very mild disease, manifesting as blisters on the skin. It is usually mild and self-limiting, with a very limited fatality rate of about 1%. The disease has previously been reported in African countries such as Nigeria, DRC, Central African Republic, and Ghana. in the early 2000s. The current outbreak is dominated by high numbers in Europe. The UK is currently leading just over 700 cases, Spain just over 500, Germany, Portugal, and France. Cases have also been reported, in both cases just below 200 in the US and also in Canada.
Still ahead on the program. It's been 6 years since Brexit, and since Britain exited the European Union. We'll be speaking with Foreign Affairs analyst Dele Ogun. Plus, would you spend a night here? You can be guaranteed sleepless nights so you can ponder the world's crisis at the Swiss Zero-Star Hotel. Stay with us. Welcome back, and it's 6 years today, June 23rd, after the 2016 EU referendum, and Brexit has been delivered, but not all is not necessarily well. A polling conducted by Savanta Comrades in October found that just 36% of people think the project has been a success, 52% consider it a failure. There are, of course, 6 biggest enduring problems that Brexit has caused to mark 6 years since the big vote. People identified food rotting in Britain's fields, and that's because of the restrictions on workers coming outside of Britain and the immigration status and so on. There's also a surge in inflation. There's also been British fishermen facing ruin, and it's no thanks, to some of the trade laws that exist between Britain and the European Union, which are still not ironed out even before Brexit and even after. There have been meltdowns at UK airports. There have also been shortage of lorry drivers. Remember the long queues at the border with France. Mobile roaming charges are also making a comeback. I speak to the man who lives in London himself and who's seen it all right from the start. Dele Ogun joins us now. He's a legal practitioner and also foreign affairs analyst and commentator. Dele, thank you so much for being here on the show. And it's been 6 years. Your thoughts on Britain leaving the European Union? Has this been a wonderful or delightful divorce at the end of the day?
Not yet, as far as the British people are concerned. And the reason for that is this. What they were promised were economic benefits of Brexit. And the reverse, of course, has been the case. The economic impacts so far have been negative. What they have achieved, which is intangibles, which the people cannot see. If you remember the slogan, take back control, they've achieved that because the primary objective was to take back control of the borders, which now they're in a position where they're able to sit back and cherry pick from Europe as to who they're going to let in. So they focus very much on the highly skilled migrants, and they've been able to block out the lower skilled migrants, which is why they have the crisis on the economic front. The farm hands and laborers that they needed or used to have, those ones have been shut out, whilst their focus has been the high-end immigrants. So, of course, the ordinary people of Britain can't see that kind of intangible benefit. All they see is the very tangible adverse effects as far as the economy is concerned in terms of pricing, cost of living, etc. The other key benefit, which again the people cannot see, relates to our continent, Africa. We often lose sight of the African dimension of the Brexit argument because with Brexit, Britain is, and this is part of the global Britain agenda, has been able to take a firmer hold as far as the relationship with Africa is concerned. Imagine if they were still within Europe, they would not be able to gorge themselves on the African opportunities all by themselves. They would have to share it one way or the other. Since Brexit, what you see, or certainly what I see, is a trend whereby the other Europeans are being squeezed out. I mean, the Germans were squeezed out after the First and Second World War. If you look at Rwanda, Rwanda was first a German colony, before it passed to Belgium as part of the Second World War punishment of Germany, whereby it lost its colonies. And guess what? Rwanda now is in the British Commonwealth. So you see how the British hold on African territories has been growing. And what I observe is a slow push on France to push them out of the African market, because the long-term agenda is that our continent will be exclusively British. That's certainly what I see. They'll deny it, but if you follow the trend lines, you will see that. The other benefit, look at Ukraine. If Britain was still part of the European Union, the Ukraine refugees would not have to be granted special permission to enter Britain. Britain will probably be the very first country that they will have been heading to. But because the Brexit walls were erected, it now depends upon the largesse of the British government. So these are the intangible benefits of Brexit, which the ordinary people cannot see. And the reason for their disappointment is that what they were promised was a better standard of living, because all the immigrants, it was said, were what was driving prices down in terms of labor costs, etc. Now that's proven not to be the case.
Well, I do understand, how the opinion can be divided. You talk about the intangible benefits, but at the end of the day, it's, how this impacts on people. And then you have the immigration crisis with the plan with Rwanda that has been widely criticized. You still have, the fisheries row, the border with Northern Ireland and so on. So people's lives really haven't been impacted by Brexit.
Well, that's correct. I mean, let's remind ourselves about the history of the European Union project. The early thinking about the project started in the aftermath of the First World War. As early as 1923 is when the initial steps by the Europeans were being taken towards a European Union. Now, the British sat by the side. They were busy locking us. Let's bring it home. Remember the 1914 amalgamation. As far as Nigeria is concerned, political union was good for Africa. And so they were creating political unions in East Africa, in South Africa, and of course in our Nigerian space. Roll forward, the very first attempts by the British to join the European Union project was 1961, a year after our grant of independence. They were rejected at that point. They tried again in 1967. Again, the French blocked their application. Again, look at the timeline, 1967, that's when the Biafrans were trying to get out of political union, and Britain was trying to join political union in Europe. And then they applied again at what will have been towards the end of the Biafran War, 1969, and that's when they finally were allowed in 1973. So there they are now, part of the political union, and they're in there until we then get our Brexit challenge in 2016. Now, and they don't actually leave until 31st of January 2020. Now, in that timeline between 1973 and 2020, obviously relationships have intertwined, intermingled, and divorce in those circumstances is a very protracted process. There'll be a lot of entanglements. It's not easy to just simply shut down and walk out. They've been more successful than others simply because Britain is a powerful, rich country. Other smaller countries who wanted to leave would never be allowed to leave. It'd be more like a Biafra situation. You cannot leave the club, because the concern was that if one leaves, it sets a domino effect. And others will be inclined to exercise their own or claim their own sovereignty back as well. Britain, by virtue of its power and by virtue of its wealth, has been able to shove two fingers up if you like, at the rest of the European community. But there will be a price to pay, and the price is still unfolding. We saw it in the Rwanda scenario where Priti Patel and the UK courts, the House, the High Courts, the Court of Appeal, and indeed the Supreme Court had blessed the Home Secretary's policy of deporting applicants to Rwanda. It's almost a throwback to colonization that, this is how Australia was created, if you remember. The unwanted convicts were all shipped off to Australia. So Rwanda has become that dumping ground. But it's the European Union who stepped in, the European Court of Justice that stepped in and said, oh, no, you don't. The world doesn't work that way. So there have been benefits. There are still complications. They will always be part of Europe, whether they like it or not. But there are lessons to be learned, particularly for our people, in terms of the control of borders. We've got a border crisis at the moment with all the terrorists creeping in right, left, and centre. In fact, not even creeping in, just pouring in. This is what is sauce for the goose should be sauce for the gander. If border control is important for Britain, border control should be important for Nigerians for the very same reasons: security of life and property.
We never get enough time to speak to you, Dilly. Thank you so much for speaking with us this afternoon. Have to go back to you on the benefits and, of course, the losses of Brexit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Couldn't sleep and my room was too noisy. Maybe complaints, hoteliers, a dread from guests. But for the Ricklin brothers, that's the entire point of their latest art installation. The Swiss concept artists have launched an anti-idyllic version of their Null Stern or zero-star hotel concept, this time located on a roadside next to a petrol station in the village of Ceylon in the southern canton of Valais, where previous versions were set up in the rolling Swiss countryside or inside a bunker. The new room, without walls or ceilings, is situated close to the sign showing petrol prices and passing cars. Intention is to make guests think about the problems of the world and inspire them to act differently. Guests are invited in their half-sleep to consider topics like climate change, war, and humanity's endless competition for perfection and the damage it causes the planet. Well, we're getting any sleep there, I guess. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.